The four men came through the telegraph office door just after sunset, and Delia Dalton knew exactly why they were there. She kept her hand steady on the brass key, finishing the outgoing message to Denver even as boots scraped the floorboards behind her. The click of the transmission felt like counting down her own execution. She had 3 days left before Marcus Cade would collect what she owed, and no amount of careful bookkeeping could hide the fact that she had nothing to give him. The lead man cleared his throat. Delia turned slowly, keeping her face calm, and met the cold eyes of a stranger, wearing a trail duster still gray with road dust. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made her reach for the letter opener on her desk. Before he could speak, the door burst open again, and Sheriff Lucian Thornton stepped inside with his hand already on his sidearm. His tired eyes swept the room, locked on Delia, then shifted to the four men. He did not ask questions. He simply planted himself between them and her, and the temperature in the small office dropped 10 degrees. The stranger held up both hands, still smiling. "We are just here to deliver a message, Sheriff. Miss Dalton has an appointment she needs to keep." Lucian did not move. "She keeps her own appointments." The man tilted his head, and his smile widened. "Marcus Cade sends his regards. He expects her in 3 days. Payment in full, or he will be happy to discuss alternative arrangements." Delia felt the floor tilt under her, but she forced her voice to stay level. "Tell Mr. Cade I received his message." The stranger looked past Lucian, his gaze sliding over her like he was appraising livestock. 3 days, miss. Do not make him come looking for you." Lucian took 1 step forward, and the air itself seemed to compress. "You delivered your message. Now get out of my town." The four men exchanged glances, then filed out slowly, boots heavy on the porch boards. The door swung shut. Silence settled like a weight. Delia exhaled, gripping the edge of the desk to keep her hands from shaking. Lucian turned to face her, and the exhaustion in his eyes had sharpened into something harder. "How much do you owe him?" She lifted her chin. "That is not your concern, Sheriff." He pulled off his hat, ran a hand through his rough-cut hair. "If Marcus Cade is sending men into my town to threaten you, it is absolutely my concern." She looked away, staring at the brass key on the desk. She had spent 2 years running the telegraph office, 2 years rebuilding after her father's business collapsed, and left her with nothing but a mountain of debt, and a name no one in Silver Crossing trusted. She had clawed her way back to respectability 1 message at a time, and now it was all about to crumble again. $5,000, she said quietly. "Due in 3 days." Lucian went very still. "That is more than this office makes in 2 years." "I know. Then how did you?" He stopped, and understanding flickered across his face. "Your father." She nodded. "He borrowed from Cade to keep the freight business afloat. When he died, the debt passed to me. Marcus Cade does not forget debts." Lucian set his hat on the desk, his jaw tight. "And you have been paying it off." "Every month." "But the interest..." She broke off, pressing her fingers to her temples. "He raised it. Last month he doubled the terms. He wants the full balance now. Or he takes the telegraph office. And probably you with it." She met his eyes, and the raw truth of it sat between them like a third person in the room. "Yes." Lucian straightened, and something shifted in his posture. "There is a way out of this." Delia laughed, a brittle sound. "Unless you have $5,000 you are not using, Sheriff, I do not see how." He crossed his arms, and his tired eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Marry me." The words hung in the air like a gunshot echo. Delia stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "Marry me. A legal contract, binding in public. If you are my wife, Cade cannot touch you. He cannot claim property that belongs to a lawman without bringing the federal marshals down on his head. And if he tries, I will make sure he regrets it." She shook her head, trying to catch up with the sheer audacity of what he was suggesting. "You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. But you do not even, we barely speak outside of official business. Why would you do this?" Lucien looked away, and for a moment, the mask of the steady lawman slipped. "Because I have been watching you fight for 2 years. To keep this town connected. To keep your business alive. To prove you are more than your father's mistakes. And because if Marcus Cade takes you, it will be over my dead body." The rawness in his voice startled her. She had always thought of Lucien Thornton as the unshakable sheriff, the man who kept Silver Crossing from tearing itself apart. The one person in town who seemed immune to scandal or fear. But standing here in the dim lamplight, she saw something else. Exhaustion. Loneliness. A bone-deep weariness that mirrored her own. "This is insane," she whispered. "Maybe. But it is also the only option you have that does not end with you in Cade's hands. And I need—" He stopped, his jaw working. "The town council has been pushing me to settle down, to prove I am invested in this place for the long term. A wife would silence them. This benefits both of us." Delia felt the weight of it pressing down on her. A marriage bargain. Cold, transactional, desperately practical. It should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt like the first real lifeline she had seen in months. "What would you want in return?" His gaze flicked back to hers, steady and unreadable. "Your safety. Your silence about why we are doing this. And a year. Give me 1 year of appearing to be a proper married couple in public. And after that, if you want out, I will arrange a quiet annulment. No one has to know it was anything but real." She studied him, trying to see the trap, the hidden cost. But all she saw was a man who looked as trapped as she felt, offering the only escape either of them had. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "this stays between us. No one knows about the debt, and no one knows this is an arrangement." "Agreed. And you do not touch me unless I say otherwise." His expression did not flicker. "Agreed." She took a breath, feeling the ground shift under her life. "Then yes, I will marry you." Something flickered in his eyes. Relief or regret, she could not tell. He held out his hand. "We do this tomorrow. Courthouse. Noon. Bring a witness if you have one. I will handle the paperwork." She shook his hand, and his grip was warm and solid, and nothing like the cold dread that had been choking her for weeks. "Tomorrow," she echoed. He picked up his hat, settled it on his head, and walked to the door. "One more thing," he said without turning around. "If Cade sends anyone else before the wedding, you send word to me immediately. Do not try to handle it alone." She nodded, even though he could not see her. Understood. He stepped out into the night, and the door closed softly behind him. Delia stood in the empty office, staring at the brass telegraph key, and wondered what she had just agreed to. The wedding took 11 minutes. Judge Cornelius Webb spoke the words in a flat monotone, barely looking up from the certificate. Dahlia stood beside Lucian in the small courthouse office, acutely aware of the 3 witnesses the judge had pulled in from the street. One of them was Marjorie Hollis, the dressmaker, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Delia knew that by sundown, every person in Silver Crossing would know that the sheriff had married the telegraph operator in a hasty courthouse ceremony, with no family present and no celebration planned. The scandal would be immediate, but it would be a different kind of scandal than the one Marcus Cade had planned for her. Lucian slid a plain gold band onto her finger. It was too loose. She looked down at it, this tangible symbol of a lie they were both committed to now, and felt a strange flutter of panic. Then the judge pronounced them man and wife, and Lucian turned to her with a question in his tired eyes. She nodded, barely, and he leaned in and pressed a brief, careful kiss to her lips. It was nothing, a formality, but it burned. They signed the certificate. The witnesses signed. Judge Webb handed Lucian the official copy with a grunt of congratulations that sounded more like a complaint. Marjorie Hollis stepped forward, her face a mask of false sweetness. "Well, Sheriff, this is quite the surprise. We had no idea you were courting Miss Dalton." Lucian met her gaze without flinching. "We preferred to keep our intentions private, Mrs. Hollis." Marjorie's eyes narrowed. How very discreet. And so sudden. Delia felt her spine stiffen. She had spent 2 years enduring the whispers, the pointed looks, the slow erosion of trust that came from being her father's daughter. She was done apologizing. When you find the right person, Mrs. Hollis, waiting seems pointless. Marjorie's smile thinned. "Of course. I am sure the whole town will be very interested to hear about your happy news." She swept out, and the other 2 witnesses followed. Judge Webb gathered his papers. "You 2 need anything else?" Lucian shook his head. "No, sir. Thank you." The judge left. The office was suddenly, oppressively quiet. Delia looked down at the ring on her finger, then up at the man who was now, legally and publicly, her husband. "So," she said, "what now?" Lucian adjusted his hat. "Now, we go to your office, collect whatever you need, and move your things to my house. People will expect it." She blinked. "You want me to live with you?" "It is a marriage, Delia. If you stay at the boarding house, everyone will know something is wrong." His voice was steady, but she saw the tension in his jaw. "I have a spare room. You will have privacy. No one will question it." She wanted to argue, but he was right. A marriage that did not look like a marriage would unravel everything they were trying to protect. "Fine. But I keep working. The telegraph office stays open. Of course." He gestured toward the door. "Shall we?" They walked out into the bright noon sun, and Delia felt the weight of eyes on them immediately. 2 women across the street stopped mid-conversation to stare. A man loading a wagon paused, his mouth hanging open. Lucian offered her his arm, the gesture so natural and so foreign that she hesitated before taking it. They walked down the main street together, a newly married couple on display, and Delia felt like she was walking a tightrope over a canyon. One wrong step, and everything would collapse. They reached the telegraph office. Delia unlocked the door, and the familiar click of the brass key felt like stepping back into the only solid ground she had. But when she turned, Lucian was already inside. looking around the small room with a focus she did not understand. He moved to the window, checked the lock, then inspected the back door. "What are you doing?" "Making sure it is secure. Cade's men know where you work. Until we are certain they have gotten the message about the marriage, I do not want you here alone after dark." She crossed her arms. "I have been working alone after dark for 2 years, Sheriff. And now, you are my wife. That changes things." The bluntness of it caught her off guard. She was used to fighting her battles alone, used to the cold isolation of knowing no one would step in to help her. The idea that someone might actually try to protect her felt both foreign and dangerously fragile. "I can take care of myself," she said quietly. "I know you can. But you do not have to anymore." The words settled between them, heavy and complicated. Delia turned away, busying herself with gathering the ledgers and personal items she would need. Lucian waited by the door, silent and watchful. When she had packed a small trunk, he picked it up without asking and carried it out to the street. They walked the 3 blocks to his house in silence. The house was small, neat, and almost aggressively plain. A front room with a desk and a few chairs. A kitchen with a cast-iron stove. 2 bedrooms barely big enough for a bed and a dresser each. Lucian set her trunk down in the spare room. "There are linens in the chest. I will be at the office most days, but I will be here for supper unless there is trouble. You do not have to cook if you do not want to. I can manage." She looked around the small, unfamiliar room that was now supposed to be hers. "This is strange." He leaned against the doorframe, his expression unreadable. "It is, but we will make it work." "Why?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "Why are you really doing this, Lucian? You could have let Cade take me. It would have been easier." His jaw tightened. "Easier for who?" "For you. You do not owe me anything." He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and rough. "My father was a lawman. He spent his whole life keeping order, protecting people, doing everything right. And when he got old and sick, the town he served for 30 years let him die in a boarding house room, because no one wanted to be bothered. I watched him fade away, believing he had wasted his life on people who did not care. I swore I would never end up like that. Alone, used up, with nothing to show for it but a badge and a reputation." Delia felt something shift in her chest. "So you married me to avoid dying alone?" He met her eyes, and the exhaustion there was so raw it hurt to see. "I married you because I am tired of watching people suffer when I can do something about it. And because maybe, just maybe, we can both stop fighting alone for a while." The honesty of it hit her like a gut punch. She had expected calculation, strategy, self-interest. She had not expected this bone-deep weariness, this quiet desperation that mirrored her own. "We are both a mess," she said softly. "Yes, but at least now we are a mess together." She almost smiled. Almost. Then the front door rattled, and someone pounded on it hard enough to shake the frame. Lucian's hand went to his gun, and he moved to the door with the smooth, coiled readiness of a man used to violence. He opened it a crack, then wider. Deputy Ben Carver stood on the porch, breathing hard. "Sheriff, we have a problem. Marcus Cade just rode into town. He is at the saloon, asking for your wife." Delia felt her stomach drop. Lucian's face went cold and flat. How many men with him? 4. Maybe 5. All armed. Lucian looked back at Delia, and his voice was steady and absolutely unyielding. Stay here. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. But, Lucian. He stepped close, and the intensity in his eyes stopped her breath. I made a promise to you this morning. I intend to keep it. Marcus Cade does not get to touch you. Not now. Not ever. Then, he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him. Delia stood frozen, listening to the sound of boots fading down the street, and realized with a sharp, startling clarity that she was terrified. Not for herself. For him. Marcus Cade was a man who looked like money and moved like a snake. He sat at a corner table in the Silver Dust Saloon, a glass of whiskey untouched in front of him. His 4 men spread out behind him like a wall. He looked up when Lucian walked in, and his smile was the smile of a man who knew he held all the cards. Sheriff Thornton, congratulations on your recent marriage. I hear it was quite the surprise. Lucian stopped 3 paces from the table, his hand resting on his gun. You are not welcome here, Cade. Cade tilted his head. I am a businessman conducting legal affairs. I have every right to be here. Your legal affairs do not include my wife. Cade's smile widened. But they do. You see, Miss Dalton owes me a rather significant sum. A debt her late father incurred, which she agreed to honor. Now, I am a reasonable man, Sheriff. I am willing to renegotiate the terms, given her new circumstances. But the debt remains. Lucian's voice dropped, cold and flat. Her debts are now mine. You want payment, you come to me. Not her. Cade leaned back, his eyes glittering. How very gallant. But I am afraid the original contract was with Miss Dalton, personally. A marriage does not erase that. Lucian pulled a folded paper from his jacket and tossed it on the table. That is a signed statement from Judge Webb, confirming that all property and debts held by Delia Dalton transferred to me upon our marriage, as per territorial law. You want to contest it? Take it up with the federal marshal. Cade picked up the paper, scanned it, and his smile thinned. How industrious. But you do not have $5,000, Sheriff. I know exactly what you make. So unless you plan to rob your own bank, you are in no better position to pay than she was. Lucian met his gaze without flinching. I will pay you $200 a month until the debt is cleared, with interest at the original rate, not the inflated rate you tried to force on her. Cade laughed, a dry, humorless sound. $200 a month? At that rate, it will take you 3 years. I am not a patient man, Sheriff. Then you are going to learn patience. Because those are my terms. You take them, or you take nothing. One of Cade's men shifted, his hand drifting toward his gun. Lucian did not look at him, but his voice cut through the room like a blade. You pull that iron, and you will be dead before it clears leather. I guarantee it. The man froze. Cade held up a hand, his expression thoughtful. You are serious about this, deadly serious. Cade studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. Very well, Sheriff. $200 a month. But understand this. If you miss a single payment, the entire balance comes due immediately. And if that happens, I will take everything. Your wife's business, your house, and whatever scraps of dignity you both have left. Lucian leaned forward, his voice low and laced with menace. "And understand this, Kate. If you or any of your men come near my wife again, I will find a reason to arrest every one of you. And I will make sure you rot in a cell until the federal marshals decide what to do with you. I do not bluff. I do not negotiate twice. And I do not lose." Cade's smile returned, but it did not reach his eyes. "I look forward to our continued business relationship, Sheriff." Lucen turned and walked out, every muscle in his body coiled tight. He did not relax until he was halfway back to the house. When he opened the door, Delia was standing in the front room, her face pale and tight with worry. She looked at him, searching for injuries, for blood, for any sign that things had gone wrong. He closed the door behind him and locked it. "It is done." He agreed to payments. She exhaled, and the sound was shaky. "What did you promise him?" $200 a month. It will take years." "I know." "Lucen, you cannot." She stopped, her voice breaking. "You just tied yourself to my debt for years. Why would you do that?" He pulled off his hat, dropped it on the chair, and looked at her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. "Because you are my wife. Because that is what this means. And because I would rather spend the next 3 years paying off a debt than spend the next 3 days knowing I stood by and did nothing while a man like Marcus Cade destroyed you." She felt tears prick her eyes, hot and unwelcome. "No one has ever." She swallowed hard. "No one has ever fought for me like that." He took a step closer, and his voice was rough and raw. Then they were all fools. The days that followed were strange and awkward and surprisingly bearable. Delia went back to the telegraph office, and Lucen went back to his patrols and town council meetings. They ate supper together most nights, simple meals cooked in silence, or punctuated by brief, careful conversations about the weather or the latest news from Denver. It was a performance, a carefully maintained facade. But it was also something else. Slowly, incrementally, they were learning how to exist in the same space without flinching. 1 week after the wedding, Delia was closing the telegraph office when Marjorie Hollis appeared in the doorway, her expression sweet and venomous. "Mrs. Thornton, how lovely to see you." Delia kept her face neutral. "Mrs. Hollis." Marjorie stepped inside, her eyes roaming over the tidy office like she was looking for evidence of a crime. "I must say, your marriage has been the talk of the town. People are so curious about how you and the sheriff came to be involved. It all happened so quickly." Delia set down the ledger she had been holding. "Sometimes things happen quickly when they are right." Marjorie smiled. "Of course. Though I must admit, I was surprised. After your previous engagement ended so publicly, I did not think you would be in any hurry to marry again." The barb landed exactly where it was meant to. Delia felt her chest tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "My previous engagement ended because it was not right. My marriage to Lucen is exactly what I need." Marjorie tilted her head, her eyes glittering. "And what does the sheriff need, I wonder? A wife? Or a solution to a rather inconvenient political problem?" Delia took a slow breath, fighting the urge to snap. "What my husband and I need from each other is between us, Mrs. Hollis. Now, if you will excuse me, I am closing for the evening." Marjorie's smile turned brittle. "Of course. Do give the sheriff my regards." She left, and Delia locked the door behind her with shaking hands. The encounter sat heavy in her chest, a reminder that no matter how carefully she and Lucian played their roles, the town was watching, waiting for them to slip. She walked home, the word strange and fragile in her mind, and found Lucian sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of him. He looked up when she came in, and his tired eyes softened. Rough day? Marjorie Hollis stopped by the office. He grimaced. What did she want? To remind me that people are watching, that they do not believe this is real. Lucian set down his pen. Do you care what they believe? She sat down across from him, suddenly exhausted. I do not know. I spent 2 years trying to prove I was respectable, that I was not my father's mistakes. And now I am married to you under circumstances that look suspicious to anyone paying attention. It feels like I traded one scandal for another. He was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table and took her hand. The ring was still too loose on her finger. Listen to me. The people in this town will always find something to gossip about. They will always look for reasons to doubt you, to tear you down. You cannot live your life trying to make them believe in you. You just have to believe in yourself. And for what it is worth, I believe in you too. She looked down at their joined hands, and something warm and fragile bloomed in her chest. Why? He smiled. A small, crooked thing. Because you are the most stubborn, determined person I have ever met. And because you have spent 2 years fighting a battle you should never have had to fight. And you are still standing. That takes strength most people will never have. She felt tears sting her eyes again. I do not feel strong. I feel like I am barely holding on. Then hold on to me. That is what this is for. 3 weeks into the marriage, everything shifted. Delia was at the telegraph office when the message came through from Denver. It was coded, official, and addressed to Sheriff Thornton. She transcribed it quickly, then read it again to make sure she had not made a mistake. Her hands went cold. She locked the office and ran the 4 blocks to the sheriff's station. Lucian was at his desk, talking to Deputy Carver. He looked up when she burst in, and his expression shifted immediately. What is wrong? She handed him the telegram, breathless. This just came through. He read it, and his face went hard. Ben, clear the room. The deputy left without question. Lucian looked at her, and his voice was low and tight. This says there is a federal warrant out for Marcus Cade. Money laundering, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder. They want him brought in for trial. Delia felt a surge of hope so sharp it hurt. If they arrest him, the debt, Lucian shook his head. The debt is still valid. Even if Cade goes to prison, his business partners will come after the money. This does not end it. But it does change things. He stood, pacing the small office. If I bring him in, his men will scatter. Some of them will come after you, after us, to settle the score. If I do not bring him in, the marshals will, and I will look like I was protecting him. Either way, we are in the line of fire. Delia swallowed hard. So what do we do? He stopped, looked at her, and something fierce and protective flared in his eyes. We finish this. Tonight. I arrest Cade, we get him on the next train to Denver, and we deal with whatever comes after. Together. She nodded. Together. He moved to the gun rack, checked his revolver, then pulled down a rifle. Delia watched him, her heart pounding. "Lucian." He looked up. "Be careful." He crossed to her, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he rested his forehead against hers. A brief, grounding touch. "I will come back. I promise." Then he was gone, and Delia was left standing in the empty office, clutching the telegram like a lifeline. Lucian found Marcus Cade at the saloon, as expected. He walked in with Deputy Carver at his back, and the federal warrant folded in his pocket. Cade looked up from his card game, and his expression flickered with annoyance. "Sheriff, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Lucian pulled the warrant, unfolded it, and tossed it on the table. "Marcus Cade, you are under arrest by order of the federal marshal. Charges include money laundering, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. You are coming with me." The room went silent. Cade's men shifted, hands drifting toward guns. Cade leaned back in his chair, his face calm. "That is a very serious accusation, Sheriff. I assume you have proof. I have a warrant. That is all the proof I need. Stand up. Now." Cade smiled. "And if I refuse, then I will drag you out of here in chains. Your choice." One of Cade's men stepped forward. "You are not taking him anywhere, Sheriff." Lucian did not take his eyes off Cade. "Ben, if anyone draws, you shoot them. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Cade studied Lucian for a long moment, then sighed and stood. "Very well, Sheriff. I will go with you. But this is not over. It is for you." They walked Cade to the jail, his men trailing at a distance like wolves, waiting for an opening. Lucian locked Cade in a cell, posted a guard, and then turned to find half the town gathered outside the sheriff's station, murmuring and staring. Marjorie Hollis was at the front of the crowd. "Sheriff Thornton, is it true you arrested Mr. Cade?" "On what charges?" "Federal charges. He will be transported to Denver for trial." Marjorie's eyes narrowed. "How very convenient. And I suppose your wife had nothing to do with this?" Lucian felt his temper flare. "My wife is a telegraph operator. She delivered a federal message. That is her job. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the marshal." He turned and walked away before Marjorie could respond, but the damage was done. By morning, the rumors would be everywhere. That night, Delia was in the kitchen. When Lucian came home, he looked exhausted, his face drawn and his shoulders tight. She poured him coffee without asking, and he took it with a nod of thanks. "How bad is it?" "Bad. Cade is locked up, but his men are still in town, and Marjorie Hollis is spreading the story that you manipulated me into arresting him to clear your debt." Delia closed her eyes. "Of course she is." Lucian set down the cup. "It does not matter what she says. The warrant is real, and Cade is guilty. The truth will come out." She looked at him, and the weight of everything, the debt, the scandal, the constant pressure, threatened to crush her. What if it does not? What if the truth does not matter, and we are both ruined anyway? He stood, crossed to her, and took her face in his hands. "Then we are ruined together, and we start over somewhere else. But I am not letting you go. Not now." The fierceness in his voice broke something open inside her. She reached up, covered his hands with hers, and whispered, "I do not want you to." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the careful, formal kiss at the courthouse. It was raw and desperate and real, and when they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. Lucian rested his forehead against hers. "We are going to survive this. I promise." She believed him. 2 days later, everything fell apart. Delia was at the telegraph office when Deputy Carver burst through the door, his face pale. "Mrs. Thornton, you need to come with me." "Now." "What happened?" "The sheriff has been arrested." Her world tilted. "What?" "Judge Webb issued a warrant. They are saying Lucian took a bribe from Cade to delay the federal arrest. They are holding him at the courthouse." Delia felt rage flood through her, sharp and clarifying. "That is a lie. I know. But half the town believes it. And Marjorie Hollis is leading the charge." She grabbed her shawl. "Take me there." The courthouse was packed. Delia pushed through the crowd, ignoring the whispers and stares, and found Lucian standing in front of Judge Webb with his hands cuffed. His face was a mask of cold fury. She shoved her way to the front. "This is insane." He did not take a bribe. Judge Webb looked at her over his spectacles. "Mrs. Thornton, there is evidence that your husband received a payment from Marcus Cade 3 days before the arrest. Unless he can explain that payment, I have no choice but to hold him for trial." Lucian's voice was flat. "I already explained it. That payment was the first installment on my wife's debt. I have the receipt." Judge Webb shuffled papers. "The receipt you provided does not specify what the payment was for. It could easily be interpreted as a bribe." Delia stepped forward. "I can provide the original debt contract. It will show the payment schedule." Marjorie Hollis's voice cut through the room. "How convenient that you have documentation now, Mrs. Thornton. Almost as if it was prepared in advance." Delia spun to face her. "Are you accusing me of forging documents?" Marjorie smiled. "I am simply pointing out that your marriage has been suspiciously advantageous for both of you. And now, when your husband faces consequences, you appear with convenient evidence." Delia felt her control snap. "You have been trying to destroy me since the day my father died. You want to believe I am a liar and a schemer, because it makes you feel better about your own miserable life. But the truth is, I have done nothing wrong. Neither has my husband. And if you had an ounce of decency, you would see that." The room went silent. Marjorie's face flushed red. Judge Webb cleared his throat. "Mrs. Thornton, if you can provide the original contract by tomorrow morning, I will review it. Until then, Sheriff Thornton will remain in custody." Delia looked at Lucian, and his tired eyes held hers with a trust that made her chest ache. "I will get the contract. I promise." He nodded. "I know." Delia ran back to the house, tore through Lucian's desk, and found the original debt contract her father had signed. It was yellowed, creased, and damning. She read through it, her hands shaking, and confirmed the payment terms. Then, she grabbed the receipt Lucian had gotten from Cade and rode out to the broken ranch, the one place she thought might have additional records. The ranch had been abandoned for a year, ever since the previous owner died. But her father had done business there, and if there were any other documents that could corroborate the debt, they would be in the ranch office. She pushed open the door, and dust swirled in the fading light. The office was a disaster. Papers scattered, furniture overturned. Someone had been here recently. She started searching, rifling through drawers and cabinets, and finally found a ledger shoved under a broken chair. She opened it, and her breath caught. It was her father's handwriting. A full accounting of every loan, every payment, every desperate attempt to keep the business afloat. And there, in black ink, was the contract with Marcus Cade, along with a note in the margin. If anything happens to me, Delia must not be held responsible for this debt. It was meant to be my burden alone. Tears blurred her vision. She clutched the ledger to her chest, and for the first time in 2 years, she let herself grieve. Her father had been flawed, reckless, and ultimately broken by his own choices. But he had tried to protect her. And now, so was Lucian. She wiped her eyes, tucked the ledger under her arm, and rode back to town as fast as her horse would carry her. By the time she reached the courthouse, it was nearly midnight. Judge Webb was still in his office, reviewing documents by lamplight. She knocked, and he looked up, startled. "Mrs. Thornton, what are you doing here at this hour?" She set the ledger on his desk. "This is my father's full accounting. It proves the debt, the payment schedule, and the fact that Lucian's payment to Cade was legitimate. It also proves that my father never intended for me to inherit the debt. But Marcus Cade forced it on me anyway." Judge Webb picked up the ledger, scanning the pages. His expression shifted from skepticism to surprise to something like shame. "This changes things." She leaned forward. "Then release my husband." Judge Webb nodded slowly. "I will issue the order first thing in the morning." Delia exhaled, the tension draining out of her in a rush. "Thank you." Lucian was released the next morning. Delia was waiting outside the courthouse when he walked out, and the relief on his face when he saw her was so raw it hurt. He crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in the world. "You did it." She buried her face in his chest. "I found my father's ledger. It had everything." He pulled back just enough to look at her, and his tired eyes were bright with something she could not name. "You saved me." She shook her head. "You saved me first. Remember?" He smiled, that small, crooked smile she was starting to love. "Then, I guess we are even. Not even close." The crowd that had gathered to watch his release began to disperse, murmuring and unsatisfied. Marjorie Hollis stood at the edge, her face tight with frustration. But Delia did not care anymore. Let them whisper. Let them judge. She had the only thing that mattered. They walked home together, and for the first time, it felt real. That night, they sat in the kitchen, the ledger spread out on the table between them. Lucian traced the lines of her father's handwriting. "He was trying to protect you. I know. Does that change how you feel about him?" She thought about it. The anger and shame and grief all tangled together. A little. It does not erase what he did, but it helps. Lucian closed the ledger. "What do you want to do with this?" She looked at him. "What do you mean?" He leaned back. "This ledger proves Cade extorted you. If we take it to the federal marshal, it strengthens the case against him. But it also means dragging your father's name through another scandal. I want to know if you are ready for that." Delia felt the weight of the choice settle on her shoulders. Then she thought about every moment of the past 2 years, every whispered insult, every humiliation, Every night she had lain awake wondering if she would lose everything. And she thought about Lucian, standing between her and Marcus Cade, promising to fight for her when no one else would. I am ready. Let them know the truth. All of it. He reached across the table and took her hand. Then we do it together. She nodded. Together. He stood, pulling her to her feet, and this time when he kissed her, it was slow and deliberate and full of unspoken promises. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I need to tell you something. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. What? This was supposed to be a bargain, a practical arrangement to solve both our problems. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being that. And I do not know when it happened. But I know I do not want to go back. She felt tears prick her eyes, but they were different this time. Warm, not cold. I do not want to go back either. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you, Delia. I know we did not start this the right way, and I know we have a long road ahead. But I love you, and I want this to be real. She smiled through the tears. It already is real. It has been for a while. I just did not want to admit it. He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no careful distance. Just the two of them, choosing each other in the quiet warmth of a house that was finally, truly home. The trial of Marcus Cade took place 3 weeks later in Denver. Delia and Lucian traveled together, the ledgers safely packed in Delia's trunk. They testified, separately and together, laying out the full scope of Cade's extortion operation. By the time the trial ended, Cade was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, and his business assets were seized. The debt was nullified. When the judge announced the verdict, Delia felt a weight lift that she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to stand without it. They took the train back to Silver Crossing, and this time, when they stepped off the platform, the town looked different. Smaller maybe, less suffocating. Marjorie Hollis was still Marjorie Hollis, but her words had lost their sting. The whispers continued, but Delia did not care. She had survived bankruptcy, extortion, scandal, and false accusations. She had found a partner who fought for her when no one else would. And she had learned that love, real love, was not something you planned or negotiated. It was something you built, one difficult choice at a time. 6 months after the trial, Lucian came home to find Delia rearranging the front room. He stopped in the doorway, watching her with a bemused smile. What are you doing? Making space. For what? She turned to face him, and her smile was bright and mischievous. For a bigger desk. I am expanding the telegraph service. If we are going to stay in Silver Crossing, I want to make sure this town stays connected to the rest of the world. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. We do not have to stay here. If you want to leave, we can. She shook her head. No. This is home now. Messy, complicated, and full of people who will probably never fully trust me. But it is ours, and I am not running anymore. He kissed her forehead. Good. Because I am not letting you go. She grinned. You already said that. I know. But it bears repeating. They stood there, in the quiet warmth of the house they had built together. Two broken people who had found a way to be whole. And outside, the town of Silver Crossing went about its business, unaware that the telegraph operator and the sheriff had just proven that love, real love, was the most stubborn, determined, and unstoppable force in the world. 1 year after their courthouse wedding, Lucian surprised Delia with a second ceremony. Nothing grand, just a quiet gathering in the front yard of their house, with Deputy Carver and a few trusted friends. Judge Webb officiated again, and this time, his voice was warm. This time, there were no whispers, no judgments. Just two people choosing each other, again, in front of witnesses, who actually wished them well. Delia wore the same cream dress, but Lucian had bought her a new ring, one that fit perfectly. When he slid it onto her finger, she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "You did not have to do this, I know. But I wanted to. I wanted you to have a wedding that felt like a beginning, not a desperate escape." She kissed him, soft and lingering, and whispered, "Every day with you feels like a beginning." After the ceremony, they sat on the porch as the sun set, watching the town settle into evening. Lucian had his arm around her, and Delia leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Marrying me. That first time, in the courthouse, when you did not really know what you were getting into." He was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. Not for a single second. She looked up at him. "Even when it got hard?" "Especially when it got hard. Because that is when I knew it was real." She rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat there in the gathering dark. Two people who had fought their way to something worth keeping. In the distance, the telegraph office stood quiet, the brass key waiting for the next message. Tomorrow, Delia would go back to work. Tomorrow, Lucian would go back to his patrols. Tomorrow, the town would keep turning, and life would go on. But tonight, they were just a man and a woman who had chosen each other, over and over, until the choice became as natural as breathing. And that was enough. 5 years later, the telegraph office was the busiest in the territory. Delia had expanded the service, hired an assistant, and become one of the most respected businesswomen in Silver Crossing. Lucian had been re-elected sheriff twice, and together, they had become the kind of couple people pointed to when they talked about what a partnership should look like. They had paid off the last of the debt 3 years ahead of schedule. They had weathered scandals, droughts, harsh winters, and the occasional outlaw passing through town, and they had done it all together. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the stars come out, Delia turned to Lucian with a soft smile. "Do you remember that day in the telegraph office when you asked me to marry you?" He chuckled. "How could I forget? You looked at me like I had lost my mind." "You had." She laughed. "But it worked." He pulled her close. "It worked because you were brave enough to say yes, and because you were reckless enough to ask." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of knowing someone, from weathering storms together, and coming out stronger on the other side. Delia thought about the girl she had been 5 years ago, desperate and alone, convinced she did not deserve peace. And she thought about the man who had stepped in front of danger for her, who had offered her a lifeline when no one else would. She thought about all the moments in between, the fights and the fears, and the fragile trust that had slowly, impossibly, become love. "Do you think we would have found each other," she asked, "if things had been different?" If there had been no debt, no scandal, no Marcus Cade? Lucian considered it. Maybe, but I think we needed the hard parts to become who we are now. I think we needed to fight for it, so we would know it was worth keeping. She nodded. I think you are right. He kissed the top of her head. Besides, I would not change a single thing. Not the fear. Not the mistakes. Not the courthouse wedding with the too loose ring. Because all of it led to this. And this is everything I did not know I needed. She smiled, feeling the warmth of his words settle around her like a blanket. Me too. They sat there as the night deepened. Two people who had built a life out of impossible choices and stubborn hope. And in the quiet of that moment, they knew, without question, that they had found exactly what they were looking for. Each other.